I work as a mechanic for a car shop in my town. It's a locally owned and run repair place that started up many years ago. The shop runs out of an old warehouse and has a bunch of broken down cars and pieces of cars sitting outside in what we refer to as the scrapyard. It's just the name we give it. Most of the scrapyard is just cars waiting for parts anyway. My job for the past 2 years has been to order and keep track of stock that goes in and out, and the best time to do this is when it isn't busy. So overnight, I guess I kind of doubled as a security guard too, because it wasn't uncommon for crazy people and teenagers to jump the fence and try to mess with or steal stuff from the scrapyard on this night. I got into work at 800 talking to my boss for a bit before he left, and then it was just me in the warehouse. It was raining outside, so inside the building it was really noisy, but also calming in a way. I did my usual routine of going through the orders that the mechanics had sent in and checking what had been used during the day. There was nothing out of the ordinary, but 2 cars needed to order very specific parts, and for one of them the mechanic didn't write down the model year, which sometimes can be really important. I got up from the desk and walked through the warehouse looking for this gray Nissan Versa so I could confirm what part to get. But as I got to the end of the warehouse, I still didn't see it. I sighed, knowing it had to be in the scrapyard, which of course was on the one day that it was raining out. I went back to my desk, and after a brief coffee break, I grabbed my jacket and flashlight and went to the back door. The rain seemed to have picked up since I was last outside, but in the distance I could see the car I was looking for hiding between a few other vehicles. I stepped out into the rain and started walking over, turning on my flashlight as I got about to the center of the scrapyard, though a sudden movement from something in front of me made me stop in my tracks. It was at the edge of the light, and I wasn't exactly paying attention, but it looked like a person moving from behind. Behind one of the cars, the rain covered up any sound I would have heard, though. So I just stood there and held my flashlight up, waiting for any more movement. "Hello, I saw you already. Just get out of here," I yelled, hoping it was just some kid messing around. I took a few steps closer to where I'd seen them and yelled again for them to leave the property. I didn't see anything. So I moved closer and started to look around the whole area, but whoever was there must have left already. Honestly, I was relieved that I didn't have to call the cops or do anything drastic. I quickly walked over to the Nissan and got the model year, then jogged back to the warehouse and went inside. I took off my jacket and sat back at the desk, filling out the rest of the info and sending through the order. I was there for another half hour filling out more of the order requests, then I had to do the stock counting in the actual warehouse part of the building. By then it was probably 12:30 or 1 a.m. I walked along the shelves and checked what everyday products and parts had been used up. While making my way down the first set of shelves, a sudden thud rang through the warehouse, and then the lights went out. I stood with my eyes wide open, staring into the abyss of dark. I couldn't see anything, but between the sound of the rain hitting the roof, I could hear footsteps walking through the building. I stared in the direction of where the sound was coming from and could immediately tell that they were coming toward me. I didn't know what to do at this point. I was sure that whoever was in here had shut off the power, but why they were here I didn't know, and without any light, I couldn't even run away. All I could do was listen to their footsteps grow louder as I stared into the pitch black. Hoping they didn't know where I was, they were only about 10 feet away when I heard them stop. After a moment, I heard a box open and things being shifted around before the footsteps began going away. I was holding my breath the whole time, and after 30 seconds it was completely silent. I waited for a few minutes before finally taking my phone out and calling 911, then using the flashlight on it to move toward the breaker room and flipping the power switch back on, looking through the warehouse with the police. All that was left were the wet shoe prints going through the building and out the back door. It seemed like the person that was out in the scrapyard had probably slipped in while I was outside and the door was still unlocked. Then they obviously stole a bunch of gear from our warehouse, even though they likely didn't have the intent to hurt me. Who knows what could have happened if they knew I was standing only a few feet from them. And without me ever getting a look at them, there's a chance that they came fully armed and willing to do anything. This only happened a few months ago. I recently moved into a very small one-story house that was close to my place of work. I used to have to drive almost an hour every day. So this move was really nice. The only thing was that I'd never really been anywhere in the area outside of where I worked, so it really was like moving to a completely different place anyway. This night I got off at 6 and drove straight home. I had to work again the next day, so I wasn't planning on doing much, probably just chill and eat for a bit, then get in bed. I pulled into my garage and went inside warming up some leftover pizza in the oven. But while it was heating up, there was a ring at my doorbell. It actually made me jump, because I hadn't heard the doorbell before, but I had no idea who would be here either. I walked down to the front door and looked. It was a woman. She looked maybe 50 and had long gray hair. I opened the door. "Hi, how can I help you?" She smiled wide and said she'd noticed I'd moved in recently. We talked for a minute as she asked about where I came from, if I had a wife or kids, and all that random small talk. Then she said goodnight and walked off. I never really had the chance to ask her who she even was, but I assumed she was just some old lady that lived down the block, but something about her, though, just felt off. I don't know how else to describe it, but I wasn't sure if there was actually something off, or if it was just because she was old. I went back to the kitchen and got my pizza, then sat on the couch and started looking for a good video on YouTube to watch. I found some random commentary video to run as background noise while I ate, but only 10-ish minutes passed before I noticed a noise from outside. I paused the TV and listened, realizing it was an idle car engine, but it was really loud. I got up and looked out the front window. There was a car parked right in front of my house. It was running, but all the headlights were off. I looked down both sides of the road, seeing the whole street was empty, with tons of other places to park. Yet they had chosen right in front of my house. I watched the car for a couple minutes, but with no changes. I went back to the couch. A whole half hour went by with the car's engine still being audible right outside the house until it suddenly shut off. I paused the TV again and listened, not hearing anything else after a minute. I got up and walked over to the window, looking out and seeing the car exactly how it was before, except it obviously wasn't running anymore. Again, nobody else was outside. It was just this one car. I shut the blinds just to make sure nobody was watching me for some reason. Then I went back to the couch and started cleaning up. But there was only a moment before a quiet thump sounded from the other side of the house, already feeling a little on edge. I walked over to the hallway and looked down toward the kitchen for a split second. I saw the shadow of someone walking away from the back door as if they'd noticed me and were trying to hide their footsteps. Quickly ran around the house toward the front. And when I looked out the window, I saw a man getting inside the parked car, driving away. Immediately, the first thing I did was go to the back door and open it, trying to figure out why he was out there. And it only took me a few seconds to notice that the handle on the outside was really loose, like they had been trying to take it off, even just by pulling the flimsy handle a bit to the side. I could see the inner workings of the lock in the door, meaning he probably would have been able to unlock it, and he was only moments away from getting inside my house. I can't say for certain if the old lady from before had anything to do with it. I know it sounds strange that she would, but I thought about the questions she was asking me, which all had to do with whether anyone else lived with me. Maybe she was getting information to know if I was a good target for whatever they planned. It's been a few months since, and I've never seen her or the man again. I was working late one night in my office trying to finish writing a report I was due in a few days. I had some tea to help keep me energized and was trying to get it all done as fast as possible. Staying up late was a regular thing I had to do for work, and it's always been difficult for me to maintain focus once I start getting tired anyway. As I worked in my office, and somewhere around 11, there was a knock at the front door. I got up and looked down the hallway. I didn't know why anyone would be at my door at this time. I walked down to the other end of the house and looked out the peephole, but nobody was outside on my porch. I took a step back and thought that it may have not actually been the front door. I was so focused on work and was on the opposite side of the house, so when I heard the light knocking sound, I just assumed it was someone at the door. I didn't know what else it could have been, but I just went back to my office and started working again. Maybe I should have been more worried about what the knock was, but I was so tired and wanting to get my work done that it wasn't even on my mind. After a few minutes, I stayed on the computer typing away for the better part of an hour. Nothing else seemed to happen as far as the knocking went. But I was getting exponentially more tired by the minute. My workflow was slowing, and my eyes were getting heavy. But just when I was going to call it a night, I reached over from my tea, and right in the window across the room was a pair of eyes staring back at me. All I could tell from the moment was that it was a man, but he quickly ran away from the window after I saw him. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I just sat there with my eyes locked on the window. It was so unexpected I was almost in a daze. After a moment, I stood up and ran over to cover the window. I didn't know who that was or why he was looking into my house like that, but it being almost midnight made it all the more terrifying. I left my office and went to the front of the house, looking out the peephole again to see if they'd gone to my front yard, but I didn't see him. I then went to a window on the back of the house and looked around, but again there was no one out there. My adrenaline was pumping, and I was not tired at all anymore, but the now silence of the house was starting to freak me out. Did the man leave, or was he still outside? I went back to my office and got my phone, then started making my way back to the front door. My plan was to call the cops while keeping my eyes on the doors and windows. But as I got to the end of the hallway, I was met by a large figure standing in the back of the living room. He was tall and wearing thick clothes to hide his identity, but his eyes were not the same as the ones I'd seen in the window. This was someone else. The man didn't hesitate, charging across the room at me as I turned and ran from my office, locking the door behind me and pressing my body against it, preparing for them to try kicking it down as they approached the door, though they slowed to a stop and just stood right outside of it. I could hear them breathing, then starting to walk back and forth like they were pacing in the hallway. But then I heard it again, a light knocking sound on the other side of the house. The man outside the door started to walk down the hallway back toward the living room. Then it was silent for a few minutes as I stayed there against the door. There was absolutely nothing. I called the cops, whispering into my phone and begging them to come quickly. I waited for about 5 minutes before I heard the sirens approaching my house as they unlocked my front door and came in. There were no altercations. I heard them walk through the house and finally up to my door, and they never saw either of the men to this day. I still don't know how the one man got in or what the two of them were trying to do. I think the knocking was their way of communicating from inside and outside the house. But then that makes me question what the first knock was that I heard. The whole situation freaks me out every time I think about it, wondering how long the one had been watching me for and how long the other man had been inside my house. It could have ended up so much worse for me, so I know I got lucky, but it's hard not to think about the possibility of them coming back, and luck isn't what I want to rely on for my safety. I work 4 days a week on 10 to 12-hour overnight shifts, which means I have to sleep during the day and be up at night, at least 4 days a week. However, switching up my sleep schedule on my days off usually causes me to get much worse sleep and just feel tired. So I started sticking to the same schedule all week. I'd usually get in bed around noon and wake up at 8 p.m. It was hard to get used to, but I had to do it for work. And after a few months, it wasn't too terrible. On one of my days off a few months ago, I got up at 9:00 p.m., having breakfast and doing some chores, then went out for a run just before midnight. This was a somewhat normal-looking day off for me. Sometimes I would have my lazy days, but for the most part, I'd try to go for a run within the first few hours of my day. My house is right next to a forest preserve, so I take the same path every time. It's basically just a big loop inside the forest preserve, and I'll go around it as many times as I need before I feel like I'm done. I started going along this trail, looping around 2 full times, before a man appeared on the path. When I first noticed him, he was too far down the seawell, but it looked like he was just walking as I started to get closer. Though I realized he wasn't moving, he was wearing a dark sweatshirt and baggy pants facing my direction as I approached him. When I passed by, he slowly moved his head to follow like he was watching me. I looked back and saw him still standing there. It creeped me out and had me thinking for a couple minutes. But when I looped around again, he was gone. I don't know if maybe he took a shortcut through the woods. The exit was on the opposite side from where he was standing though, and he definitely didn't pass me on the path. Him having appeared and left in such a strange way gave me a bad feeling, causing me to cut the run short and head home. I left the forest and jogged through the street to my house. When I got inside, I chugged some water and sat down, only to be startled up by a sound right outside my front door. It was almost 1 a.m., so nobody should have been at my house. I walked up and looked through the peephole. A man was on my porch, and I recognized him from his dark sweatshirt as the same man from the forest preserve. I felt my stomach drop as I watched him just stand there. He didn't knock or ring the doorbell. I must have watched him for a whole minute, seeing the man do nothing more than glance around a few times. I started to get really creeped out, thinking about how he had to have followed me home and was clearly not behaving normally. I walked back to my kitchen and quietly dialed 911, telling them about a possible stalker that was outside my house after reporting it. I went back to the door and the man was still there. He stood in the same place, glancing around and never knocking or anything. For the next 10 minutes, even when the police car pulled up, he didn't run. He acted like nothing was wrong and gave no explanation for what he was doing at my house or why he followed me, almost equally as terrifying. They couldn't actually hold the guy under arrest because he hadn't really done anything yet. It was clear his behavior was off and something was wrong with him, but it wasn't enough to do anything about it. I don't know why that guy followed me and creepily stood outside my house, but with him behaving the way he was, I wouldn't doubt it if he had something horrible in mind for. This happened last year. It was the beginning of spring, and we were going through a rainy month where pretty much every day there was some kind of downpour, either light drizzling or on storms. I do deliveries for a popular restaurant in my area, so rain isn't the most amazing thing when I have to be running through it all the time to pick up and drop off orders. This night started as any other. I got to work at 600 and drove around a couple orders before getting one to deliver somewhat far away. It was 10 miles out from our restaurant, going into the more woodsy part of town. It wasn't all forest or anything. It was just more spread out and less densely populated. The roads were all covered by trees, and most neighborhoods weren't visible from the main roads while driving, though there was only one car behind me. Not in a weird way, but that's just how empty the road was. But once I got maybe 2 miles, in a beam of someone's headlights in front of me came out of nowhere, revealing a car in the middle of the road. Swerving to a stop, I slammed on my brakes as the car was now sideways, blocking the whole road. The guy behind me did the same, stopping so close to me that I was surprised we didn't collide after the initial seconds of shock. I looked up at the car in the middle of the road. It was a beat-up-looking sedan, and they had their brights on, still making it too blinding to see who was in the car. I'd say that whoever was in there had to have been falling asleep at the wheel or just not paying attention, but they seemed to have intentionally left their headlights off until the last second when they swerved into the road. I didn't see where they came from. It was too dark. So I'm not sure if they were just driving down the road or if they came from the side of the road. The car behind me laid on their horn, clearly frustrated by whatever this was. I probably should have been more skeptical. But in the moment when something crazy like this happens, it's hard to think straight. Either way, though, the car behind me was too close for me to move back, and the car in front was blocking the whole way forward. So I couldn't go anywhere unless one of them moved first. After a while of the guy behind me honking, he stopped and got out of his car. I looked in the mirror, seeing a large man begin walking through the rain. He looked furious as he passed right by my car and walked up to the other. He stood at their window angrily yelling at whoever was in there, but with the rain, I could barely hear what he was saying, and I couldn't hear anything at all of what the other person was saying, if they even were responding. I saw the man outside bang on the window a few times as he yelled, but then he suddenly stopped and went quiet. He slowly backed away from the window, then nervously walked back to his car. As he was getting in the driver's side of the other car, a man stepped out wearing a thick hoodie that covered most of his face. I was now getting really freaked out and still had no way of leaving other than running out of my car and into the woods, which was probably a terrible idea. So I sat there and watched as the man quickly made his way up to the car behind me. But just as he got to the door, the car floored backwards, their tires reached as they slid against the pavement, losing control and sliding off the road. They made it past a few trees before eventually slamming into one further into the woods. The man that was still on the road turned and looked at my car, making eye contact with me in my side mirror. Horrified, I put my car in reverse and pressed on the gas, backing out past him, then turned around and sped off. I obviously called the police, but still had no idea what was really going on there that night. An officer got to the scene about 15 minutes after I'd left, and the only thing there was the car wedged in the woods against a tree. The other car was gone, and neither of the men were there. I think we can all assume what probably happened without even having any reasoning to go off of, but there's still a million questions that need answers. All I can say is that if the other guy behind me wasn't there, I likely would be in his place right now. For the past decade, I've lived a quiet life in Utah. I own a small cabin in a town of people living the same life as me. There's a town center for shops and everything, but most people have cabins or houses a few miles out with either farms or just plain land. I didn't farm or anything, but I do have a lot of grassy land that borders some mountains. This happened almost 10 months ago now. It was around 8 p.m. one night, and I was sitting outside by the fire pit on my laptop. I did this almost every night except when it was snowing out. It was always a calming way to end the evening before going to bed. But this night was different. I was out there for an hour, really zoned in on my laptop, when through the crackling campfire I heard something in front of me. I lifted my head, seeing a man standing on the other side of the flame, maybe 15 feet across from me. The man looked like a typical guy in his 40s that lived around here, big and rugged with a large gray beard. I stood up from my chair. "What are you doing here? Where did you even come from?" I said. Trying to hide the shakiness of my voice, the man stared at me with a look I'd only assume was that of someone about to do something terrible. But then he looked past me at my house. I kept my gaze on him as he began walking toward the front of the cabin. He went up to one of the windows and quickly peered inside, saying something under his breath as he turned and started to walk away. I called out again, asking what he was doing, and threw in some unfriendly words, but the guy just ignored me. He walked down all the way to where the grass met the trees, and then he was gone. It was completely insane. Some guy being out here right by my house was no accident, especially not at this time of night, and the way he was acting was beyond strange. It was like he was looking for something and had no fear of intruding on me. I put out the fire right away and went inside, locking up the cabin and getting my sidearm out, just in case I didn't think he was going to come. 56, 55, back. But I wasn't sure about anything anymore as far as the police go. Calling them out here would take way too long to be a viable option if something were to happen. I was on my own, as that's just the way things are here. I stayed up for several more hours, way past the time I usually went to bed, and kept my eyes and ears open for anything. I don't remember the time, but it had to be at least 1 a.m., maybe even 2 a.m. When I finally passed out on the couch, I was trying my hardest to stay awake, but it just didn't happen when I woke up. Though, there was an unusual constant sound. Wind blowing through the house. I sat up, still confused and tired, and looked over at the front door. It was wide open. I jumped up and ran to the door, looking outside in all directions, but not seeing anything in the dark. I slammed it shut and locked it, then turned around to face the possibility of someone being inside my house. I stood there by the door for an entire minute, listening for any sounds of someone being inside. It was a small cabin, so even something like heavy breathing might be loud enough to hear, but it was dead silent. Only the creaking of the wood from the wind outside. I slowly stepped through the hallway and into each room, checking every corner and opening every door, but nobody was inside after that. I stayed up all night, and as soon as the sun came up, I drove into town and filed a report with the police, making the assumption that the man I'd seen that night was likely the one who'd broke into my cabin. The one issue with all of it is the motive. There were a few odd things missing, which meant he definitely had broken in and walked around the house while I was passed out, but nothing they took was worth any real value, and of course they didn't harm me either. So what they intended is still undetermined, and without knowing why they came to my cabin, there's no saying whether or not they'll come back. I just gotten home from work and was sitting back on the couch with a movie on. It was storming outside, and it was Friday, so what better to do than stay up late and watch some TV. I had the window curtains open in case any lightning started up, hoping to catch some cool sights. It doesn't rain very often where I live, so nights like these are really rare and always get me excited. But as the night went on, and at just about midnight, I noticed something outside my window across the street. There was a man walking down the sidewalk. He had no hood or coat on and was completely soaked, but he walked up to one of the houses and onto their porch. I couldn't see too much through the rain and dark, but it looked like he was waiting for them to answer the door, and after a minute, He walked down to the sidewalk again and continued further down the street. I couldn't see any further, but seeing that gave me an uneasy feeling at this time of night and in this kind of weather. It just wasn't normal to be walking around and up to people's houses. I closed the curtains by the window, just so that if he did come to my house, then he wouldn't see me inside and expect me to answer the door. But only 15 minutes passed before there was a sound outside my house. Someone was walking up my driveway and up to my front door, but there was no knock or doorbell. I heard them moving around, walking across my porch and near one of the windows, then going back to the door. By now I was really confused and wanted to look out the peephole, but was worried that they'd hear me. I waited, and after a minute, there were no more sounds. I quietly walked up to the door and looked. It was the man I'd seen earlier, and he was still there, standing at the edge of my porch looking at the door with a blank face. I watched him for a few seconds before I got really creeped out and backed away. It was now that I started to think calling the police would be worth it, especially if he was going around to other people's houses and doing the same thing. I turned to get my phone, but then there was the sound of footsteps departing. I looked out again and he was gone after giving it some thought. I felt that this was still too creepy to not inform the police about whatever that man was doing. Was not normal. I called and let them know about it. They said they would send an officer to patrol the neighborhood and see if they can get the man to stop or explain what he was doing. But that was about all that could be done at the time. I thanked them, then hung up and checked out the door one more time before going back to the couch. The whole thing had really worn me out, though, taking away the relaxing night and just making me exhausted. I shut everything off and went upstairs to get in bed. But as I got in and turned off the lights, a thump sounded from downstairs. I sat up, and then it came again. It was loud, like someone smashing something against the wall. I got up and ran to the top of the stairs, and now hearing it for the third time, I realized it was at the front door. Someone was hitting something against it, like they were trying to forcefully break it down. I walked down a few steps and looked over, seeing the door violently shake every time they hit it. It looked like they were just a few hits away from breaking it down. Now absolutely terrified, I locked myself in the bedroom and called the police again. The operator said that an officer was in the neighborhood and would be here in just a minute. But through their voice I heard wood shatter and the door slamming against the ground. Footsteps quickly moved through the downstairs, going into every room without stopping. Then they began moving up the stairs, but were cut off by the officer, pulling in and running up to the house. The intruder immediately stopped and ran for the back door as the officer came in and yelled at him, and apparently they had trouble getting the back door open. In the heat of the moment, so the officer was able to get him down and into the car. The man, who looked like a psycho up close, refused to say anything, like not even a single word, before they drove him off. His intentions were clear, though. He was carrying a heavy hammer and had a bunch of zip ties in his pocket. That doesn't exactly sound like a coincidence considering what he was doing. Why he chose to go for my house isn't clear, though. But what likely saved me was calling the police that first time. If I hadn't, the officer wouldn't have been in the neighborhood so close by and likely would have gotten here too late for me to have ever been seen again. My name's Jasmine, and I was just 19 working the night shift at a gas station last year. And this is the reason why I quit. The words on that note still scare me. It was a regular Sunday night. Nothing out of the ordinary. The clock had just struck midnight, and the fog outside made everything look a bit eerie. You see, at that time, the gas station was usually as quiet as a library with hardly any customers around. I was keeping myself occupied by scrolling through TikTok on my phone, trying to stay awake. Then out of nowhere, the door creaks open and walks this guy. He looked normal enough, but there was something about his eyes that gave me the chills. He wandered around the store, glanced at some chips, but didn't buy a thing. Then he saunters up to the counter, and that's when things start feeling weird. He asks if he can use the bathroom now. Normally that wouldn't be a big deal, but there's just something about him that's off. I tell him it's over to the left, and he heads that way. I go back to my phone, figuring it's just another late-night pit stop, but time starts ticking and this guy isn't coming out. 10 minutes pass and I'm starting to get uneasy. I mean, what's he doing in there? I call out, "Is everything okay?" No answer. My heart's racing, and I head over to the bathroom to check on him. The wind's howling outside, and all I can think is this night's taking a turn. I call out again, but still no response back at the counter. I'm not sure what to do. Then there's this noise outside like a thud, and right after that, footsteps. Now I'm freaked out, but I tell myself it's just some animal or the wind. But the minutes keep dragging on, and this guy is still in the bathroom. I'm torn between worrying about his safety and fearing for mine. I'm almost ready to grab the bathroom key and open up the door, but when I turn around to grab the key, his face is right there in the small window. I scream, and he's just standing there grinning that awful grin. Those eerie eyes fixed on me. I dropped down behind the counter and hit the button to lock all the doors. My heart's pounding so hard I can barely breathe. Music. I dial 911, my voice shaking as I explain what's happening, but then I hear it. The bathroom door unlocking and creaking open, my whole body goes cold, and I'm cowering, scared out of my wits. I hear footsteps getting closer, and I'm doing everything I can to hold back the tears. But when it sounds like the man is right next to the counter, there's a knock on the door and the man's footsteps stop. Can't believe my luck. Another customer came to my rescue unknowingly, scaring off whatever nightmare is after me. I'm too afraid to move, but after about 5 minutes, the dispatcher tells me the police are here and that I can unlock the doors. I do it as fast as I can. The relief washing over me. The police search the place, every nook and cranny, but they don't find anything. The man must have used the bathroom window to go in and out. When the police checked the bathroom again, they found a small note on the floor saying, "See you soon." I have no idea what this man was planning, but it felt like someone dropped a stone in my stomach. The police offered to give me a ride home, and I don't hesitate. I'm done with that place. They promised to do their best to find the guy, but deep down I know there's only so much they can do. The next day, I quit that job. I never set foot in that gas station again. And as for the man, well, he vanished into thin air. The whole thing left me with a gut feeling that I'll never shake, a constant reminder that sometimes reality can be scarier than any ghost story. 2 missing for 6 months. For the past 2 years, I've been working the night shift at a gas station over time. I've experienced my fair share of odd occurrences, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded during one chilling night. It was around 2 a.m. when things took a disturbing turn that I could never have anticipated. As I manned the station, an air of familiarity surrounded me. The humming of the fluorescent lights, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional rumble of a passing vehicle were the usual sounds that accompanied my late-night shift. I had become accustomed to the quiet solitude of these nighttime hours, even though they sometimes brought eerie feelings, but this particular night was different. 2 individuals entered the store, a man and a woman. The moment they walked in, I was hit by the unmistakable scent of alcohol that clung to them. It was as if the alcohol had seeped into their very being, and it was impossible to ignore. They made a beeline for the alcohol section, where the shelves were stocked with various spirits and beers. Observing them from behind the counter, something struck me as odd. The woman appeared agitated and uneasy, her face marked by anxiety. On the other hand, the man exuded an unnatural calmness that set off alarm bells in my mind. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about the situation. Growing up in a household marked by my father's abusive behavior toward my mother, I learned to recognize the signs of distress in a woman's behavior, and the woman before me was displaying those signs all too clearly. Her eyes darted around the store, avoiding eye contact at all costs. It was as if she was trapped, desperate to get away from something or someone. I continued to watch them as they browsed the shelves, my concern deepening. Suddenly, I heard her voice. The woman was saying that she needed to use the bathroom. It was a simple request, but what happened next sent shivers down my spine. The man's demeanor shifted dramatically from his previously eerie calmness. He now became frantic, almost panicked. His voice grew loud as he vehemently denied her request, his words carrying a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore. I was torn. Part of me wanted to intervene, to step in, and he offer help to the distressed woman. But another part of me hesitated, worried about escalating the situation and putting her in more danger. As they approached the counter, the man's composure returned, and he asked for a pack of cigarettes. I did my best to mask my concern, treating him as any other customer. even though I knew something was very wrong. Finally, they left the store, and a heavy feeling of relief washed over me. My instincts told me that I needed to do something, that this situation was far from normal. I reached for the phone and dialed the police, my voice steady as I described the two individuals in their direction of travel. Around 15 minutes later, a police officer arrived at the gas station. He listened carefully as I recounted the events of the night, from the couple's entrance to their odd behavior to the escalating tension. He assured me that they were taking the situation seriously and that they had a car tailing the man's vehicle. His presence brought a sense of reassurance, even though the unease still lingered after our conversation. The officer left, and I continued to work through the rest of my shift. As dawn broke and the sun began to rise, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I was eager to head home and finally get some rest. The following day, I turned on the news, hoping for some closure to the unsettling events of the previous night. When I saw froze me in my tracks, the man's face was on the screen. A mugshot, confirming that he had been apprehended. But it was the backdrop of the image that struck me with a renewed sense of horror. The woman, the one I had seen with him, had been missing for 6 long months. The news report revealed that she was from another state, and the pieces of the puzzle started to come together. The man had been arrested, but the true horror of the situation lay in the details that unfolded. The woman had suffered through unimaginable cruelty and evil. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't shake the feeling of profound sadness for what she must have endured. As the news report continued, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that she had been found alive, anger at the man responsible for her suffering, and a lingering sense of unease at how close I'd been to a deeply disturbing situation. Reflecting on that night, I couldn't help but be grateful that I had followed my instincts and taken action. The woman's desperate situation could have easily gone unnoticed, but the events of that night had been a wake-up call. Life can take unexpected turns, and sometimes being vigilant and compassionate can make all the difference. Story 3: The gunshots. Working the night shift at a gas station can make you feel pretty alone and uneasy. Let me tell you about one night that I still remember clearly. It was so dark outside that even the moon seemed to be hiding the quiet of the night. It made me feel like I was the only one in the world. I was just trying to keep busy, passing the time, until my shift ended without anything strange happening. The hours felt long, and the only things around were the bright lights above me. I cleaned the counters, filled the shelves, and checked the security cameras. Anything to keep my mind off the weird feeling creeping in. But then, out of nowhere, something unexpected happened. Around midnight, 2 people walked into the gas station. They looked messy and moved around in a wobbly way. Just seeing them made me feel nervous. They didn't seem okay. It was pretty clear that these 2 weren't in a normal state. They acted like they had drunk too much alcohol or taken something strong. Their walking was wavy and their words were hard to understand. They went to the area with sodas, and that's when my heart started to race. Their voices got louder and louder, and it felt like the tension was building up. I couldn't help but listen to their talk quietly. It sounded like they were arguing about something. I started feeling anxious because it was clear that things were getting out of control. They seemed like they might do something unpredictable any second. I knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad was going to happen. It was like a storm was coming, and you could feel the air getting heavy. I felt like I was waiting for something bad to happen, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. All of a sudden, one of the guys stopped arguing and came up to the counter where I was standing. My heart raced even faster as he got closer. He looked at me with intense red eyes, even though I was scared inside. I tried my best to stay calm as he asked for cigarettes. The other guy disappeared, and then everything got quiet. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath. Just as I was about to give the guy the cigarettes, the other guy started running toward us. It was like all the tension in the air exploded at once. Time seemed to slow down as things got really chaotic. There were loud noises and shouting and things crashing to the ground as things went on. It became harder to make sense of what was happening. There were loud bangs, like something hitting hard, and they echoed through the store. I heard about 5 or 6 bangs, and it felt like they were hitting me in the chest. It was a scary sound, and it made me feel really small. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in an ambulance. My head hurt so much, and I was really confused. The lights were bright, and I could hear voices, but it took me a while to understand what was going on. Slowly, I started to understand what had happened. I had been hit with one bullet in my chest and passed out. The guy who wanted cigarettes had been hurt really badly. Bullets had hit him and he didn't make it. It was hard to believe something like that could happen. So suddenly, I can't forget that night. It's a memory that stuck with me and I think about it a lot. It reminds me that danger can come out of nowhere and change everything. I wish I could have done something to stop it, but I can't change what happened thinking back. I hope others can learn from my story. I hope they're careful in their own lives and avoid getting into dangerous situations. Life is fragile, and we need to make good choices to stay safe. Story 4. Can I borrow your phone? It was a cold autumn night when I found myself working alone at the gas station. The clock struck midnight, and the only sounds that could be heard in the empty streets were the occasional gusts of wind. The fluorescent lights in the small store were flickering and casting eerie shadows on the worn-out linoleum floor. The constant hum of the refrigerators filled the air. I tried to keep myself occupied by flipping through a magazine and occasionally looking out the window as the minutes passed by. I felt very lonely, due to the lack of company and the repetitive nature of working. The night shift was starting to have a negative impact on me. However, I had no idea that this ordinary night would soon become the most terrifying experience of my life. At around 3 a.m., a car arrived at one of the gas pumps. The headlights lit up the area, showing a man sitting in the driver's seat. There was something about his appearance that gave me chills. He had an unkempt beard and wore a worn-out jacket that seemed odd on this chilly night. His eyes appeared tired and red, and his face showed signs of aging as if he had experienced a lot of difficulties in life. I put on a smile and went outside to welcome him, but I couldn't shake off a strange feeling of discomfort. He stared at me intensely, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. I cleared my throat to ease the tension. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you tonight?" I asked, trying to appear calm. The man's voice was rough and carried a sense of urgency. "I require assistance. My vehicle has broken down a short distance away, and I do not possess a phone. Would it be possible for you to lend me yours?" Despite my initial hesitation, my compassion for someone in need compelled me to hand him my phone. He promptly dialed a number as he put the phone to his ear. I couldn't help but notice a wicked smile appear on his face. He abruptly ended the call and handed the phone back to me, his expression now harsh and threatening. "Thank you for your help. You've been very kind." I felt a shiver go down my back as he turned and left. Vanishing into the darkness, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was very wrong. I checked my phone and saw that he hadn't made a call at all. The screen showed only a sequence of random numbers and symbols, giving the impression that someone had tampered with it. I felt scared when I realized that I had fallen into a trap. Without wasting any time, I went back inside and locked the doors. I brushed it off as just being some weirdo. The gas station seemed to have regained its usual calm after the man's unsettling visit, and I continued my shifts with a bit less apprehension. However, 30 minutes later, as I was ready to leave, I heard a series of faint noises coming from outside. At first, I dismissed it as just the wind or a passing car, but the sounds continued growing louder and more distinct. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. My heart began to race and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I tiptoed toward the window and cautiously peeked outside. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a shadow moving near the gas pumps. My mind raced and I realized that those footsteps weren't coming from a passing stranger. They were coming from the man. Panic gripped me as I realized he was back and seemingly lurking around the gas station. The security measures we had put in place suddenly seemed inadequate. Unsure of what to do, I considered calling the police, but a part of me hesitated. What if I was just being paranoid? What if it was all just a coincidence? As the minutes ticked by, the footsteps grew fainter and eventually faded away. I stayed by the window watching and waiting, my mind swirling with uncertainty. Should I lock up and leave? Should I stay and finish my shift as usual? The decision felt impossible to make, and I was left grappling with my fear and confusion after deciding to call the police for my own safety. I anxiously waited for their arrival. Finally, after 10 minutes, they showed up. I quickly unlocked the doors and they entered the gas station. I proceeded to explain everything that had occurred that night. The police then conducted a thorough search of the area, and thankfully I had made the right decision to call them. They discovered the man's car parked just 3 minutes away in the woods. Upon searching the vehicle, they found a rope and a knife. I can't help but dwell on the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't called the police and simply walked home. This is the story of why I'm never going camping again and why you shouldn't either. I still have nightmares about that face in the lake as the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the forest. My group of friends and I, Charlie, Lucas, and Emma, were brimming with excitement as we embarked on our long-awaited camping trip. The anticipation of adventure and camaraderie filled the air as we hiked through the wilderness, our backpacks laden with supplies and hearts filled with joy. After an hour of traversing through the dense foliage, we stumbled upon a hidden gem, a picturesque lake nestled amidst. The towering trees, the sight before us, took our breath away, and without a second thought, we decided this was the perfect spot to set up camp for the weekend. Under the canopy of stars, we pitched our tents and gathered around the campfire. Laughter and banter echoed through the woods as we shared stories and indulged in marshmallow roasting. It felt like we were in our own little world, far away from the troubles of everyday life. As the night wore on, the warmth of the campfire provided comfort, but there was a lingering feeling of something amiss. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the eerie ambiance that nighttime in the wilderness can sometimes bring music. Yet the unease persisted, and as I dipped my toes into the lake to cool off, an unexpected smell assaulted my senses. It was foul, and I couldn't quite put my finger on its origin, but I dismissed it, thinking it must be some natural occurrence in this secluded paradise. However, the sense of disquietude only grew stronger when I heard an odd noise emanating from my left. My curiosity piqued. I cautiously investigated the source but found nothing unusual. In an attempt not to alarm my friends, I decided to keep the oddity to myself. As midnight approached, we decided it was time to retreat to our tents and surrender to the embrace of sleep. I crawled into my cozy cocoon, hoping the tranquility of the surroundings would lull me into a peaceful slumber. But as the night wore on, every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind seemed amplified. Music, preventing me from slipping into a restful state. At the stroke of 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a shadowy figure silhouetted against the glow of the campfire. I assumed it must be one of my friends, unable to sleep as well, so I bravely ventured outside my tent to join them. To my bewilderment, there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest, and a chill ran down my spine. Music, fusion, and fear coiled within me as I tried to comprehend what had just occurred. It was as if the forest itself was playing tricks on me, messing with my sense of reality. Then a sudden splash broke the silence coming from the lake. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and a shiver of trepidation shot down my spine. Fear now coursed through my veins, but I resisted the urge to flee back to my tent. Summoning my courage, I reached from my flashlight and crept down to the water's edge. The night was draped in darkness, and I scanned the area with my beam of light. My heart pounded loudly in my ears, drowning out every other sound. And then I saw it in the left corner of the lake. The light revealed a face, a ghastly visage adorned with a sinister grin. My blood turned to ice, and I could feel a scream building up in my throat. But before it could escape, I turned and sprinted back to my friends, Tara urging me on. Upon returning to the safety of the campsite, I relayed what I had seen to my friends, and their expressions turned from amusement to concern. Although skeptical at first, my own sheer panic and distress convinced them that something was seriously wrong. Frantic frenzy, we packed up our gear and fled the lake. Never once looking back, panic-induced adrenaline propelled us forward, our only desire to escape the darkness that had descended upon us. As we finally reached the safety of our car, we managed to contact the police. We conveyed every chilling detail. But even as we did so, the surrealism of the situation lingered. How could something so sinister happen in such a serene setting? The police acted swiftly, and a search party was dispatched to the lake. It was as if the forest itself held its breath in anticipation of what would be uncovered yet. As the investigation unfolded, it yielded only unsettling clues. Bloodstains on leaves and traces in the water, but no concrete answers. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to a woman. But the figure I saw in the lake was undoubtedly a male in the weeks that followed. News spread like wildfire. The police had uncovered a trail of disappearances and unsolved cases spanning several years. Speculation circulated and rumors painted the lake as a cursed place, haunted by the souls of those who had vanished without a trace. Story. To the Woods Massacre. My name is Joseph, and I'm a 21-year-old who loves the outdoors. I'm an avid hiker and camper. So when my friend suggested a camping trip for the weekend, I was thrilled. We were all excited about the prospect of a peaceful getaway, but little did we know that our adventure would be anything but tranquil. As we arrived at the chosen spot near the serene river, the golden hues of the setting sun painted the landscape in a mesmerizing glow. We started setting up camp, laughter and excitement filling the air. However, the joy was short-lived. When a peculiar event unfolded amidst the rustling leaves and gentle breeze, a branch snapped somewhere in the dense woods surrounding us. The sudden sound caught our attention, and a strange sensation washed over us. We exchanged uneasy glances, acknowledging that it felt as if something was lurking in the shadows, observing our every move, attempting to brush off the unease. We continued with the preparations as we gathered around the campfire, our faces illuminated by its warm glow. We heard another strange sound this time, a loud thump coming from just outside our tent. We instinctively grabbed our flashlights and cautiously stepped outside, only to catch a fleeting glimpse of a figure darting away into the dark night. Fear began to creep into our hearts, and the once exciting camping trip was now clouded with uncertainty. Retreating back into the safety of our tent, we huddled together, trying to rationalize what was happening around us. Yet the unsettling noises persisted throughout the night, with occasional loud screams echoing through the wilderness. We could neither fathom the source nor muster the courage to investigate further. Instead, we clung to each other, seeking solace in our shared fear. As morning dawned, we decided to cut our camping trip short and head home. The unnerving events of the previous night were still fresh in our minds, but little did we know that the horrors had only just begun. While driving back, we came across an old man whose car was stranded in the middle of the road. His face was contorted with terror, and he spoke of a chilling encounter in the very same woods we had camped in. The old man recounted seeing a large, shadowy figure lurking amidst the trees, its gaze fixated on him with malevolence filled with dread. He had fled the area as quickly as he could, leaving behind his peaceful camping spot, turned into a haunting realm of fear. The uneasy glances we exchanged told us that we couldn't dismiss his words as mere coincidence. Our hearts pounded with trepidation as we quickly packed up our belongings, eager to leave that ominous place behind. The unsettling encounter with the old man left us unsettled and haunted by an inexplicable sense of danger in the days that followed. Chilling news emerged, painting a grim picture of the dark forces lurking in the woods. We had once hoped to find solace in. The police discovered the lifeless bodies of a family, a couple and their 2 young children, near the very location we had camped in. The realization struck us with terror. Our camping trip had unknowingly intertwined with a heinous crime scene. It became evident that the ominous figure glimpsed by the old man was none other than the merciless killer responsible for these tragic murders. Our hearts sank, and we felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that we had escaped with our lives. The horror of what we had unknowingly encountered haunted our thoughts, and the screams of terror we heard that night lingered in our minds like a relentless echo story. 3-something took my boyfriend. My name is Jessica, and I couldn't have been more excited about the camping trip with my boyfriend Leo. The beautiful wilderness, the crackling campfire, and the starry night sky all promised a romantic and memorable weekend. Little did I know that this adventure would quickly turn into a terrifying nightmare. As the sun set on the horizon, Leo and I sat by the campfire, wrapped in each other's warmth. The woods around us were alive with the sounds of nature, and we laughed and shared stories late into the night. However, amidst our laughter and joy, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow darting behind a tree. "Leo, did you see that?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. Leo turned to look in the direction. I pointed, his face serene. "Oh, it's probably just a fox or some small critter," he reassured me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My instincts told me there was more to it than just a curious fox. I suggested we call it a night and head to the tent. But Leo was enamored by the beauty of the night sky. He insisted on staying by the campfire to stargaze for a while longer. Reluctantly, I made my way to the tent, zipping it up tightly to keep pesky mosquitoes at bay. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, unable to shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. My anxiety reached its peak when I realized that Leo hadn't returned to the tent. I checked my phone. It was 2 a.m. Leo was still not beside me, trying to convince myself that he had simply gone out to relieve himself. I closed my eyes, hoping to find solace in sleep, but then a noise jolted me awake. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. "Leo, is that you?" I called out, trying to steady my voice. The footsteps outside ceased immediately, plunging the surroundings into an eerie silence. Fear began to overtake my senses, but I reasoned that Leo must be responsible for the noise, that there was a logical explanation. Yet as time passed and he failed to return, panic set in outside the tent. A dark silhouette emerged, standing motionless. I could feel its gaze on me, penetrating through the thin fabric of the tent. Frozen in terror, I mustered the courage to unzip the tent and flee from whatever lurked beyond, with adrenaline coursing through my veins. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, not daring to look back. My only thought was to reach help, to escape the sinister presence that had invaded our peaceful retreat. Finally, I reached a road, and with trembling hands I dialed 911, desperately pleading for assistance. The dispatcher reassured me that help was on the way, and I clung to that promise like a lifeline. The police arrived, and I frantically recounted the horrifying events of the night. Together, we returned to the campsite, and I called out for Leo, praying for a response. But there was silence. No trace of him anywhere. That's when they discovered footprints leading into the dense woods. The police followed the trail with determination, and soon they found him. Leo lying on the ground, shirtless, alive, but seemingly unaware of what had transpired. With great urgency, they rushed him to the hospital, hoping to find answers and provide him with the medical care he needed. But the mystery only deepened as he regained consciousness. When Leo woke up, he appeared disoriented and confused, unable to recall any details of our camping trip. He didn't remember anything about the shadows, the eerie noises, or even our arrival at the campsite. The police scoured the woods for any evidence that could lead them to the person responsible for the night's horrors, but there were no signs of anyone else being there. The entire ordeal remained shrouded in an enigmatic fog, leaving us with more questions than answers to this day. The chilling memories of that camping trip haunt me. The sense of danger that lurked just beyond our campfire still sends shivers down my spine. The fear and the unknown have left a lasting impact on both of us. A reminder that even amidst the beauty of nature, darkness can creep in without warning. Story 4: Vanish Without a Trace. My name is Alex, and I want to tell you about a camping trip that changed my life and the lives of my 4 closest friends forever. It was supposed to be a fun-filled weekend filled with laughter and adventure, but instead it turned into a chilling tale of mystery and loss. My friends and I, Ben, Sarah, Emma, and Mark, decided to go on a camping trip deep into the heart of a remote forest. We were all eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse ourselves in the tranquility of nature. Little did we know that our desire for adventure would lead us down a dark and eerie path. We arrived at the campsite, a picturesque clearing surrounded by ancient trees. The sun was still high in the sky, casting a warm glow over our surroundings. We set up our tents, laughing and joking as we worked together, excited for the weekend ahead as the evening descended upon us. We gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories from our past. The atmosphere was electric with camaraderie and friendship. We marveled at the beauty of the night sky, the stars twinkling like diamonds. But as the night wore on, a strange unease settled over us. There was something eerie about the silence that enveloped the woods. The usual sounds of nocturnal creatures seemed absent, replaced by an unsettling quiet as we huddled around the dying campfire. Sarah suddenly exclaimed, "Did you guys hear that?" We all fell silent, straining our ears to listen. Faint, rustling sound echoed in the distance, sending shivers down our spines. "It's probably just an animal," Ben said, trying to quell our growing unease. Despite his words, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. We decided it was best to turn in for the night, hoping that a good night's sleep would alleviate our unease inside my tent. I lay awake, my mind restless. The night was heavy, with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. I wasn't the only one feeling it. I could hear the rustling of sleeping bags and the soft murmurs of my friends nearby. Suddenly, a low moan pierced the stillness, chilling me to the bone. It sounded like a distant cry for help. But I couldn't be sure. Did anyone else hear that? I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a collective silence, and then Emma's voice came from the darkness. I thought I heard something too. Fear gripped us as we listened intently for any other sounds, but the forest seemed to hold its breath, concealing whatever secrets it held within its depths, unable to ignore our growing fear. Mark suggested that we search the area. In the morning, we tried to convince ourselves that it was merely an animal or some trick of the wind, but the unease lingered like a ghostly presence. The morning light filtered through the dense foliage, awakening me with a sense of excitement for the day ahead. As I unzipped my tent, I noticed that Ben's tent was still closed. It struck me as odd, since he was usually an early riser. I called out to him, "Hey, Ben." Time to wake up, but there was no response. I walked over to his tent and found it empty. My heart started pounding in my chest as I checked the other tents. There was no sign of Ben anywhere. Panic started to rise within me, and I quickly woke up the others, explaining that Ben was missing. We frantically searched the campsite and the surrounding area, calling his name over and over again, but he was nowhere to be found. As fear and uncertainty gripped us, we decided to call the police for help. They arrived at the campsite and conducted a thorough search of the forest, but they found no trace of Ben or any other person who might have been there. The days turned into weeks, and despite numerous search efforts, there was no sign of our missing friend. Forests seemed to hold its secrets close. Refusing to reveal the truth behind Ben's disappearance, we were left with more questions than answers. How could someone vanish without a trace in the middle of the woods? What had happened to our dear friend? As the months passed, we struggled to come to terms with a loss in the unsettling mystery that surrounded it. Our once tight-knit group started to drift apart, each of us haunted by the memories of that fateful camping trip.